all my work decision. The time consuming.
Encourage him.
I can say in the last 8 years.
The Honourable High Court Judge, Justice Kamal Kumar, CEO of Investment Fiji, CEO of Consumer Council of Fiji, Permanent Secretaries, ladies and gentlemen. It gives me much pleasure to be here. I'd like to thank the Consumer Council of Fiji for organising this forum. I'd like to make a couple of announcements today, actually. One in particular regarding victims' compensation vis-à-vis third-party insurance, but also to be able to talk about a body which we are currently looking at putting in legal format to address generally issues of compensation. But before I do that, I'd like to make similar observations that has been made by the CEO, and that is essentially that third-party insurance has been an area of insurance of much contention. It has been an area that is highly litigious in the sense that most of the cases actually end up in court, or they dwindle away because the people who are the victims of accidents do not necessarily have the emotional, physical or the financial well-being to be able to continue with their claims, and that is a real issue that we found in Fiji. We also found that in some cases that when they did approach lawyers, the lawyers would not charge an upfront fee but would take a certain percentage of the payout. We passed a law a few years ago where we restricted the amount of fees the lawyers could take, and that is in the maximum of 10% in respect of the percentage of fee they could take out. That of course created somewhat of a crisis amongst the legal fraternity, but they've all, I think, settled down, and they now realize that that is obviously the best practice. So we heard some horrendous stories where people, for example, have had a payout after 3 or 4 years, where they may have got, for example, $50,000 or $100,000, but the lawyers end up taking half of it, and without any rhyme or reason, without necessarily any proper billing. So that was put to a stop. But the fundamental reason why it has happened, as the CEO highlighted, has been that over the years the issue of third-party compensation through this insurance scheme has primarily been left unregulated for a long period of time, and it has been left essentially to the court system to award damages. In countries like New Zealand, you have independent tribunals that actually do assessments, that you can appear before these tribunals, and where they have a pool of funds that actually is utilized to pay any compensation. In Fiji at the moment, what we are looking at through the Solicitor General's office, we've also had discussions a couple of days ago with the CEO to get the input, is to develop a tribunal that does not only deal with third-party related matters or insurance matters from road accidents, but also other claims that may emanate. For example, we have also victims of crime. We also have various other compensatory issues. At the moment, for example, if you go and buy a second-hand vehicle, we've heard horrendous stories again where people have bought a minibus, they've invested their life savings, or they've gone off and borrowed money from financial institutions, and some of them, because they're first-time borrowers, they end up with financial institutions because mainstream banks don't lend to them. So they go to these financial institutions where the interest rates are about 17–18%. And then 6 months later, after they bought the vehicle, they've incurred the debt, the floor of the minibus falls down, or the engine basically falls out. Many stories like that. And at the moment, there is no proper recourse available to them, a recourse that is not highly litigious, a recourse that does not include them having to expend their financial resources, which is limited in the first place. So we are looking at a multi-pronged tribunal, or tribunal for want of a better word, where people could actually bring these sorts of issues before the tribunal. Of course, the success of it will be dependent on the rules pertaining to payout. For example, the CEO has highlighted that in some countries, for example, they actually have a price for each limb of yours. If you're right-handed, If you lose, your thumb, there's a particular cost or there's a particular price to that. If you lose up to your wrist, there's a particular, compensation amount that's available, or up to your elbow, whatever the case may be. That is a lot more transparent basis. That is a lot more efficient basis. It does not involve lawyers necessarily. Unfortunately, some lawyers have over the years specialized in third-party insurance claims. They have also, having been in the private practice, you can see that some of them specialize very much in adjournments. Some of them actually specialize in dragging out matters in the hope that there'll be a higher rate of attrition in respect of people sort of falling out and losing interest. And that does happen. Most of you who know that and would be honest about it would know. I see some of you shaking your heads in agreement. And that is a fact. It does happen. So I think the problem has also been, because it has been primarily left to the private space between insurance companies and lawyers and the private victims, there has been this trend by insurance companies not to set a precedent, and I think all of them are sort of struggling with that issue. Because if, for example, somebody takes a honest approach, the case of this gentleman who's earning $101,000 at the age of 30, imagine what his potential income would have been when he was 40 or 45. So we have completely deprived of him of his potential. We've obviously deprived of him of his family and emotional life. We have strained all the resources that his parents had, when at a stage when probably the parents should be depending on him, he's dependent on them. So it's multifaceted, the impact of such accidents, and also multifaceted that we do not actually have a proper mechanism to be able to address these issues. So I think it is very clear, and we hope to at least have a draft out in the next 2 to 3 months' time. We will be having public consultations in respect of this because we need to address these issues. It does go to the very core of ensuring that we look after people who are on the fringes of our society, or people who are not necessarily well off. In the same way that I have spoken about the lack of insurance available, insurance cover available for those people who live in rural areas, or even basic insurance. I see the new president there of the Insurance Council, and we hope to have some discussions in respect of that. But there is a desperate need to address this. There is a desperate need to give a particular level of comfort to many innocent victims who have suffered from accidents through no fault of their own, but are now the victims of a sort of wider scheme that has the inability to address those issues, and in a very cost-efficient manner, in a very effective, timely, effective manner. So that's all I would like to say, because I think it'll be very interesting to, of course, hear from the panel. It's great that you've got one of the judges who also was a private practitioner, and I'm sure he may have also represented insurance companies as a private practitioner. He now, of course, sits on the bench to be able to get the different perspectives on that. I remember a couple of years ago when we put a levy on third-party insurance. Some insurance companies became quite belligerent about that, but the fact of the matter is that it has, in fact, worked from our perspective. We do collect third-party insurance levy, and it is critical. It was actually to send a message to say that third-party insurance policies that are put in place, that was put in place by government, actually has a particular purpose. Of course, insurance companies need to make a profit. They need to survive for them to be able to offer products in the future. There are many other products that they do offer, and those products sometimes is on a need basis. But as a nation, we need to understand that there are certain protective mechanisms that we need to have for everyday citizens of our country. We need to feel comfortable with the fact that they use public transportation. They need to feel comfortable with the fact that they use the public transport system. Of course, in Fiji, we have, we call it the public transport system. Paradoxically, is run by the private sector. In many countries, when you say public transport system, it's actually run by the state, or various governments. For example, in Australia's case, the New South Wales government, for example, runs the public transport system. In Fiji's case, of course, many of the bus operators provide that. Some of them struggle. with the fact that they have very small companies. The cost of running these businesses are also exorbitant for the small operators. There are, of course, bigger operators who do quite well. But the fact of the matter is that all of them need to know, and all of us need to understand, that we need to have the protection for the traveling public who travel on these buses, and those people who travel on the cars. I mean, I'm told that the number of cars in Fiji have almost tripled in about 6 years' time. The cost of cars have reduced. You have better roads. People see the ownership of a car as a sense of having social mobility. People want to buy a car because they see that they're doing well, so they need to have access to those vehicles. Of course, we encourage people to use the public transport too. But all of this requires some form of protection for everybody that uses the transport system, in particular on our roads. So, ladies and gentlemen, I thank you for the invitation, CEO, and we look forward to putting out more information to the public on the draft bill that we're going to put out. We look forward to input, and I wish the panel a very good discussion. Naka, thank you.